But we do have a very special guest joining us. His name is Dr. Kurt Miceli. He is the medical director for an organization called Do No Harm. We learned about Do No Harm. I don't remember when the last time was we had him on, but it wasn't that long ago. Talking about accreditation now and DEI requirements and policies and all that. Doctor, welcome to Hot Talk with the Ox, sir. Good to have you on.
Oh, same here, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Really interesting stuff. In fact, when we set this up the other day, I thought it was something I hadn't heard about before, and then I didn't get a chance to see it, but I heard Will Cain on the Will Cain Show on Fox News talking about it yesterday. So apparently this is getting some attention, sir. So we're talking about accreditors for medical schools and the DEI. President Trump signing the executive orders, having these accrediting bodies stop imposing DEI requirements on schools. You say this is a good thing. Can you expound upon that?
Absolutely. You know, this is often an overlooked dynamic that exists really between the accreditor and the school. But these accreditation agencies are really powerful organizations. They have huge influence over medical schools, colleges, universities, nursing, physical therapy, throughout the health professions. And they really set the educational guidelines, and they effectively decide who can get a degree. And so when you have the Liaison Committee on Medical Education, which is the accreditor for MD schools, or you have the Commission on Osteopathic College Accreditation, which is for DO schools, when you have them really focused on ideology and imposing DEI requirements, it really changes what that school does and how that school responds. And they have specific language in their guidelines. I mean, some that goes as far, certainly for the DO schools, of actually embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion in the mission, vision, values of the organization. And that just changes things in such a way and really takes it off the focus, which really should be on the education that's provided, whether, again, for a physician, for a nurse, for whoever it might be, to make sure that these health professions are focused on quality in education. I went to residency, which is also an accredited program. It's accredited by the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education, and it's essential. No physician would want to go to an unaccredited program because then you won't be able to get a license to practice independently and such, right? So, you're as a student, as a young physician, sort of growing up and such, you are wanting to go to these organizations, but then these accreditors are imposing these requirements. It just allows schools to use that as an excuse to continue DEI, and it keeps promoting the same ideology. So this executive order is really powerful and super important in just really making sure that these unlawful discriminatory practices aren't going on, and really focusing medicine on the quality that it does need to focus on.
Whenever we hear these things, it seems like every day there's some new thing coming out of the Trump administration, stuff that we hadn't heard about, didn't know existed, hadn't thought about. This certainly is one of them, at least for me. And you only hear about it now when they're trying to stop it, which means, Doctor, that this has been going on for what? I mean, countless years.
It's at least over the past decade where we've seen DEI infused in. I mean, we know that the Liaison Committee on Medical Education, again, the LCME, the one that focuses on accrediting MD schools, we know that it had specific requirements that said that schools needed to look at recruitment and retention activities to achieve mission-appropriate diversity outcomes. So, I mean, that's been part and parcel to it. And, at Do No Harm, we actually were able to get a Freedom of Information Act request, and we saw some of the action that the LCME was taking against the University of Utah School of Medicine, where they really said that they didn't have sufficient diversity pipeline programs and partnerships, and the LCME wanted an update on their DEI office. Now, that was a few years ago, but this is, yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, this has been going on at least for the past decade, and it's been a real challenge. It's, the accreditor sort of takes this nod to DEI, and the school then takes the requirement up and it points to the accreditors to justify their programs, and it becomes this really vicious cycle. And in fact, it even has, at sometimes it's been used almost as a fear tactic or a scare tactic to state lawmakers, where lawmakers are looking to get rid of DEI from education, and then schools may very well come to them and say, well, we won't be able to get accredited. And it just becomes this absurdity, and it's so important that the Trump administration has taken this action to just make very clear that these discriminatory programs are unlawful and they need to stop, and accreditors need to focus on quality, on excellence, on the training that is absolutely essential to, again, getting us the best doctors, the best nurses, the best physical therapists, the whole nine yards.
I know it's probably difficult to quantify with any amount of accuracy, but can you at least kind of estimate the harm that this has done? Maybe the good education, or even some of the good doctors or nurses that we didn't get because of DEI policies?
Yeah, I think it really speaks to the fact that as we look to change things, we're going to be in a better situation where we focus on merit, where we focus on really providing the very best for allowing students to again show their worth and really be excellent and focus on the key things that will advance their education. So, hard to necessarily quantify and such, but I think really important for us to look at where we're going and where we're headed. And I think the absolute essential nature is that we're placing the emphasis back on medicine, back on really the integrity that's there. And I think the issue of trust really does become such an important one between patients and providers to again really recognize that we've got to focus on merit, we've got to focus on quality, and again that's I think what any one of us would want when we're sitting in the ER or sitting in that doctor's office or wherever we might be to know that we've got merit that's driving and really being the best that we can be.
Yeah, that's exactly what we want. And so we've learned a lot now with the Trump administration canceling the grants to Harvard. There's been a lot of conversation about private schools versus publicly funded schools, etc. But, and correct me if I'm wrong, but these accrediting bodies could actually have leverage over private schools that otherwise wouldn't need to be beholden to the government and can do whatever they want. Yet they have to have DEI policies if they want to get accredited. Is it the same accreditors that accredit, private colleges and public?
You're absolutely right. When you look at the MD programs, there's only one accrediting body, and that's the LCME. When you look at the osteopathic schools, there's one, the Commission on Osteopathic College Accreditation. When you look at graduate medical education, there's just one, the ACGME, and that is for all public-private. Again, any school or any university system that wants to be accredited to provide those programs has to go through those accreditation agencies. And so it does, there is a monopoly there in that sense. And I think, another part of the executive order really does call upon a way to maybe recognize new accreditors to increase competition and such. But, these are the accreditors that we currently have. And you're absolutely right. This is a way to sort of impose DEI throughout the spectrum of every medical school, because again, there are no unaccredited medical schools in the United States, and so each and every one of them is either subject to the LCME accreditor or the osteopathic equivalent. So it's absolutely, again, makes it all the more important for us to have this executive order in place to really set the frame, and important for Congress to really look to the action that it can take. So, we've got the ACE Act, which is the Accreditation College Excellence Act that was proposed by Burgess Owens this year, and that's an important act because it, again, from a congressional standpoint, prohibits the accreditors from mandating colleges adhere to diversity, equity, inclusion standards as a condition of accreditation. So I think it's great that we really see this being looked at on multiple fronts and important for us to really restore the integrity to medicine.
Man. And again, just to kind of drive the point home, so you could be all in for a private college. My college doesn't buy into all this stuff. That's why we go to and fund a private college and all that. But yet they're held hostage by these accreditation boards, apparently, that demand this DEI. And as we see the Trump administration doing this, so just turning it off and putting it out there isn't enough. There are so many layers of this that we're learning. This being the latest one that I don't think. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the bulk of us had any idea this was going on.
I think you're absolutely right, Dan. I think this is again one of those overlooked areas, and it's really good that we are looking at it and that we are sort of really turning over every stone to make sure that we are focused on quality, focused on merit. And certainly, if there are folks out there who see that their medical school, their nursing school is engaging in discriminatory behavior because an outside organization is is imposing it through the accreditation and such, we'd love to hear about it at donoharmmedicine.org. I mean, that's part of our mission, is to help ensure that we are keeping accountable and making sure that, again, excellence is driving and not identity politics.
And you raise a good point, and that I'm glad you have that forum, right? Do No Harm is the organization, because I would imagine that only recently are people now willing to stand up and say, we've been keeping this quiet this whole time because we didn't want to say anything. Now they can finally say something, and it'll be interesting to see moving forward how many organizations or institutions come out and say, we always hated this stuff. Now finally we can speak up and say such.
I think you're absolutely right. There's no doubt that more and more folks are feeling confident to be able to speak up and to voice their opinion. Because the vast majority of practitioners that are out there, they just want to do their job, raise their family, do the right thing. Or students, they just want to go to school, get a good education, advance, and be able to move on in their careers. But unfortunately, the politics has just gotten worse and worse, really, over the past years. And thankfully, we have an administration that's willing to say, hey, let's stop the politics and let's focus on education. It's very logical, very simple, and it's absolutely imperative. If we're going to be the very best and produce the very best students, we've got to make sure we're focusing on excellence in education.
So getting this through congressional approval then and in statute is important, so that with the next president, the executive order doesn't just expire and it goes back to the old ways, right?
It's critical, and that's why we're thrilled that Burgess Owens has introduced the ACE Act, the Accreditation for College Excellence, because effectively it would make this into law and prevent those DEI standards from really coming from the accreditation agencies, and just to end that practice.
Well, Dr. Kurt Miceli, the medical director for Do No Harm. Again, the website, Doctor?
Absolutely, donoharmmedicine.org. And we certainly encourage if folks have tips or information, or if they want to sign up as members. We really encourage, again, patients, providers, whoever you are, if you're concerned about identity politics in medicine, we welcome you to join.
Thanks, man. Good to have you on.
Absolutely, Dan. You take care.
You too. Dr. Kurt Miceli joining us from Do No Harm on Hot Talk with the Ox. Had no idea. And right? I mean, all of a sudden we're seeing the layers of this. People talk about it all the time, but boy, once you start deleting things, it's almost like the cascading window, like when you too many windows open and all of a sudden you try to close one window and a bunch more open.
Yep.
Just shutting it all down.
Yeah.
Pretty tough deal, pulling the plug, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Man, this is interesting. And also, and I'm no super expert in this, but I've attended more colleges than the average human being. And I'm familiar with accreditation, and the whole thing is one giant hoop you have to jump through, or a series of hoops. So I get that. The accreditation board, so you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. But generally, they're to make sure that you're not graduating stupid people.
Right.
Rather than what color of skin a certain percentage of people have to have, or if you're adhering to DEI policies of all things. Great conversation.